Hello and welcome to our thought for the day for Friday the 7th of January. For those that don't know me, my name is Steve Weiss and I'm part of the admin team here in the BenFro. Now in my paid life, one of the things that I never enjoyed was organising the process of awarding pay rises. It was so hard to make sure the process was genuinely fair, and there always seemed to be somebody who there was a case made for who should have got more. Now today I'm going to read the parable of the vineyard workers from Matthew chapter 20 verses 1 to 16, and I'll give you my thoughts on Jesus' story, which at first reading seems to be centred on what is a fair rate of pay, and I'll talk about what I think it means for us. Here we go. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them into his vineyard. About 9 in the morning he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, "You also go and work in my vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right." So they went. He went out again about noon and about 3 in the afternoon and did the same thing. About 5 in the afternoon he went out and found still others standing around. He asked them, "Why have you been standing here all day long doing nothing?" "Because no one has hired us," they answered. He said to them, "You also go and work in my vineyard." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones hired and going on to the first." The workers who were hired about 5 in the afternoon came, and each received a denarius. So when it came to those who were hired first, they expected to receive more. But each one of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. "These who were hired last worked only 1 hour," they said, "and you have made them equal to us, and we have borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day." But he answered one of them, "I am not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have a right to do what I want with my own money? Are you envious because I am generous?" So the last will be first, and the first will be last. Now, Matthew is the only gospel writer to include this parable, and he did not share anything further of Jesus' words or teachings on this parable, so it's down to us to interpret it for ourselves. Is this really about money and about working practices? If it is, then I think it either condones some unusual working practices, or it may just be a simple message for us not to compare our pay to those of others. Don't just make yourself miserable thinking about others that have it better than you. Just be satisfied that you're being paid a fair wage for the job you're doing. But I don't actually think this is what the story is trying to tell us. The parable ends with the words, "So the last will be first, and the first will be last." For me, the way the parable concludes makes it obvious that it's not about rewards. It's about not coveting what others have, and I think that potentially, ultimately, it's about salvation. Now the 10th commandment tells us, "You shall not covet," and this is a very broad subject. For many of us, when we are growing up, we were jealous of our brothers and sisters, and we thought that our parents treated them differently, or maybe even loved them more than us. This is not normally the case, but the feelings it generates are so complex. Sometimes it can be that the family have very little when the first child comes along, but maybe more, sometimes much more, when the youngest is born. So any envious feelings of the first child are just a lack of understanding, that their parents can give the younger child more simply because they have more to give. In a large family, the age difference can be quite significant between the firstborn and the child born last. My mum was 16 years older than her youngest sister, and that youngest sister was just 6 years older than me, and is just 6 years older than me. My grandmother, I know, would have been a very different lady in so many ways. Not only would she have been older, but she'd have been more mature and a more experienced mum by the time my aunt came along. She would at times have treated the two sisters very differently. I think this parable that represents God as the landowner and us, all of us, as the labourers. I believe that God treats us all the same. He doesn't treat any of us any differently. At the end of the day, we'll either be accepted into heaven or not. So we should not feel superior to others in any way. Maybe we feel this way about others we see around us in our church family. If we're a lifelong Christian, maybe we begrudge those who turn to God late in their lives, maybe at the very end. This parable speaks to me about God's generosity, his love for all of us, and his hope for all of us, that we all turn to him and accept his grace. It doesn't matter when we do this or what causes us to do it. It isn't about how much our life changes when we turn to him. It's simply about doing it and accepting his grace. Just as we shouldn't covet what others have in life, we should also not begrudge or judge others in their journey of faith and their own hope of eternal life. Have a good day. Thanks for listening.